Thor! Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of this new Weezer album, the White Album. Weezer, long-running California power pop and alternative rock band, and this is their 10th full-length studio album, which I've been looking forward to for a couple of different reasons. One, there were great singles and teaser tracks to this album. GIRLZ and Thank God for Girls. And I actually think the band has slowly been on a progression of making some better music. Now, we all know that the 2000s were a pretty dark time for the Weezer catalog. Numerous awful Weezer albums were released around this time, and the band was just kind of sweetening their sound to the point where it was just completely beyond consumption. There were like a handful of decent tracks on Hurley, and also Everything Will Be Alright, that record was actually relatively solid, in my opinion. And now the White Album is here, and it is their most consistent album in years. So consistent and so good that it actually makes me bitter. Why? Why did this happen? Because it's not like Weezer are reinventing themselves on this album or trying anything like radically new here. They're just kind of sticking to their guns once again, but this time they just happen to be on target. But then I have to kind of remind myself that Weezer came through and were popular in the mid and late 90s. And since then, the music industry has gone through a really awkward phase. The traditional media outlets that Weezer was born out of are no longer really relevant when it comes to music discovery, at least for the target audience that Weezer typically would reach, the introspective type, the rock music fan. They're just not going to look for new music on or on MTV anymore. So now Weezer doesn't really have the pressure to come out with a radio single or an ultra sugary album that's going to be competing with every other radio hit out there on the market. Now they have to compete on the democratized internet with a legitimately solid album. And I think they did it. They did it not only just by putting together one good song after another, but in a way kind of pulling from their glory days in the 90s with a little touch of some Californian sunshine pop music from the 1960s. As I was listening to this record with my buddy Max, he actually pointed out that the lead melody of the song, Good Thing, along with the chord progression, actually resembles quite a bit the Rascals song, It's a Beautiful Morning, boo-doo-doo. And there's a ton of Beach Boys influence on this record as well. Now, there are 10 tracks on this album. Most of them end at the 3-minute and 30-second mark, which only further proves that Weezer just has this music here down to a science. A summery, angsty science. The opening track, California Kids, lyrically, it might be a little bit of an over-exaggeration as to how willing the California Kids will help you if you are in trouble. But it's still a fiery anthem and a wonderful tribute and a really catchy song with soaring siren guitar leads riding on top of these punching, just boom, boom, pounding and confident guitar chords. There are a lot of anthemic and triumphant spots on this record, but this album has a dark side too, which you might have already guessed, which comes through on tracks like Thank God for Girls. This is one of a handful of cuts on this record where piano sits pretty prominently in the mix, not just those roaring Weezer guitars. And Thank God for Girls is a single that I like even more in the context of this album than I did just like it by itself. The chorus on this thing just ruptures with pent-up sadness and anger over unrequited love. And Rivers, as our songwriting protagonist here, kind of falling short of that alpha male archetype. Rivers is just still channeling so well those emotions that come from adolescent and awkward teenage love well into his 40s. And it just works. And I'm sure that he and every other Weezer fan that's still out there enjoys or maybe is even angered by the irony of a song like LA Girls, where Rivers is essentially pleading with these LA girls to act their age when he's just completely unwilling to do the same. But you cannot deny that that is a fantastically catchy track and one of the many songs on here where the ballad underneath these heavy, again, Weezer alternative rock guitars, it just feels like a song much older than the recording we're actually hearing, much older than even the 90s that Weezer were born out of. LA girls, please act your age. But back to this Thank God for Girls track, I do like some of the weird religious undertones that pop up in the lyrics on this track. There's a lot to this song. I think it's one of the better tunes that Weezer has come out with in a while. And there are other cuts on here that are great songs too, and they're equally moody or a little bit edgy, like on the song Do You Want to Get High or on the track Jacked Up. I think this is the saddest Weezer's been sounding since Pinkerton. With the dying flowers and these strained falsettos, it definitely calls back to that era, and it does a great job of it. And there's some irresistibly sweet songs in the track listing here that may be a little too cute at times, but I do think they're still very enjoyable. To me, even just in general, the worst songs in the track listing here are pretty good. There's not one song on here that I want to skip. So good thing. Of course, that track is very sunny. It's very upbeat. It's very sweet. It's just about being in the midst of a blissful love affair. And then with the song Endless Summer, hey, 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 hey. It's a little acoustic closer for the album that feels really good. It's a really warm finish. But one track I do want to specifically highlight before I get out of this review is the song King of the World. Not only is this one of the best choruses Weezer has come through with in a while, but it's also one of the most adult and lyrically telling songs I think Rivers Cuomo has written, or at least put onto a Weezer album in a long time too. He seems to be singing about his wife, and not only his wife's childhood, but his wife's emotions, and how if he were king of the world, or if he had control over this kind of thing, that she wouldn't shed a tear, she wouldn't be sad unless she really wanted to be. It's about somebody who, from Rivers' perspective, really understands emotional pain and wants to be the bearer of that pain for somebody who he really cares about. So while in a sense it is a very sad song, and it does have some very strong personal details in there, it's also a track that is shrouded musically and vocally in that same youthful hope and idealism that most Weezer songs are. As I said earlier, that song Good Thing is a little too sweet for my taste, just a little bit, but again, not a terrible song. And the track Summer Elaine and Drunk Dory didn't really stand out to me, just didn't really seem to have as strong a lyrical narrative behind it as many other tracks here did. And really that's it for like lowlights for me on this album. This album is consistently highlights. I mean, even again, this Drunk Dory track has a great melody to it that I still find myself singing along to on the chorus. Ever since this album dropped, I've been consistently coming back to it again and again and again, and even as I was listening to it more times than I normally would if I were just reviewing it, I didn't really feel like I was reviewing it. I was just putting it on to enjoy it. I wasn't even, in the forefront of my mind in the way that I would be critically analyzing the album, blah, 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 because after a while I just kind of realized, man, there's really nothing that bad about this record. There's nothing I have to harshly critique about this album. I can just sit back and just listen to this thing without worrying about, what are the tracks I want to skip? What are the bad parts? What are this, oh boy, here comes this track. I hate this moment. It's just a super great pop rock album. It just comes through with great music without doing anything too experimental or too pretentious or too weird or difficult to digest or anything that needs a whole lot of explaining. All I really feel like I'm doing coming on camera here is saying to you guys that confirmed, this is a very great Weezer album. And this is the greatest thing they've done in a long time. Again, makes me slightly mad that it didn't come out earlier, or that the band hasn't been this consistent up until this point, because even in Weezer's darkest days, I've always felt like this album was within their potential. Later is better than never, I guess. I'm feeling a strong 8 to a light 9 on this project. Transition. Have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You the best, you the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, or you might die. Anthony Fantano, Weezer, that White Album, baby!